So what have we learned from the methods of behavioral genetics? There are two big findings, and they're both kind of surprising. The first is that there's high heritability for just about everything. Just about every psychological trait in which people differ, a large proportion of the difference is due to the genes. So it's true for intelligence, it's true for personality, it's true for religiosity, it's true for happiness, something we'll discuss in the final lecture. The way in which you're different from the person next to you, from your siblings, from your friend, is to a large extent determined by your genes. Now, there's a critical qualification that's important to raise here, which is that this conclusion about the importance of heredity, the importance of genes, applies within human groups. And we know that there are differences between human groups. Different ethnicities, different cultures, different countries vary in intelligence. But it's fully consistent with the high importance of heredity for differences within groups, that the differences between groups may be due to environmental forces. And to see this, consider an example by the geneticist Richard Lewontin. Imagine two plots of land, each which have genetically diverse seeds, and you fertilize one and you don't fertilize the other. Well, plainly the ones you don't fertilize are going to not grow as well. This has been the entire, and so there'll be a big difference between the plots that has entirely an environmental cause, your choice of which plot to fertilize. And this could be true even if within each plot the variation in the size of the plants is determined entirely by the genes. You could have 100% heredity within each group, but the differences between the groups have an entirely environmental cause. And Lewontin makes this analogy on purpose because he's speaking to differences we find in human groups. You often find cases where human groups differ in all sorts of ways, but it turns out that they've had different environments. Imagine one group gets worse access to health care, education, to social opportunities, and so on. This group might fare poorly relative to a group that has much better access to all of these things. And this can be true even if the differences within each of the groups is due to environmental factors. Furthermore, we know that environmental factors can have a huge influence on intelligence. And here's how we know it. We know it through what's been called the Flynn effect. And it goes like this. Whenever we do IQ tests, we always standardize them to 100. So if you want to know what the average IQ was in 1960, it was 100. If you want to know what the average IQ will be in 2050, it'll be 100. But what Flynn did was he asked the question, what would happen if you didn't standardize the tests? And his results were astonishing. Basically, if you look at people, say, from 1950 to people in 1980, or compare from the 1930s to 1990s, it turns out our intelligence has been rising. That is, if you take somebody from roughly 1985 and tested them using the same test as they did in the 50s, they would have an average IQ of about 120. Put it simply, our IQs have been going up rapidly over the last 70 or so years, maybe 70 to 100 years. Nobody exactly knows why, but this is proof positive that groups' IQs can change, can move around due to factors that have nothing to do with genes, because clearly there wasn't a genetic difference over this time. So the first finding is the strong heritability, though within group, not between group. The second finding is almost as surprising. The second finding is that all of the remaining variance, almost all the remaining variance, is due to non-shared environment. So remember, it's everything adds up to heredity plus shared environment plus non-shared environment. And it turns out that shared environment, the sort of environments you get from your parents, from within a family, statistically count for little or nothing. So when it comes to personality or intelligence, an adopted child is no more similar to his siblings than to a stranger. To put it, for example, the IQ correlation between genetically unrelated adults who are raised in the same family is about 0. If I have a family and I'm a high intelligence introvert with highly conscientious whatever, my children are likely to share some of my traits, but my adopted children are not, suggesting that whatever I do to my kids, whatever effect I have, it's not shaping their basic psychological processes. And this is such a surprising and weird conclusion. I'll devote the next part of the lecture to talking about it.